June 28, 1971. Columbus Circle, Manhattan, New York. The sun was high, the city alive with summer energy. Thousands had gathered, waving flags and banners of the Italian-American Civil Rights League. Cameras clicked, reporters jotted notes. Joseph Colombo, standing at the podium, adjusted his microphone. His bodyguards flanked him, alert but stretched thin in the open crowd. Then, from the corner of the plaza, a young man in a white jacket approached, calm, focused. 2 shots rang out. Colombo staggered, collapsing onto the marble steps. Screams erupted. Panic spread. People ran in every direction. Sirens tore through Manhattan streets. The gunman, later identified as Jerome Johnson, was instantly neutralized by Colombo's bodyguards. No interrogation, no questioning, only silence. At first glance, it appeared political, a backlash, a public demonstration gone deadly. But the truth lay deeper. Colombo had broken the Mafia's most sacred rule. He had exposed himself to the public. A boss, visible, outspoken, challenging authority and law enforcement simultaneously, had become a target, not for justice, but for correction. The rally, meant to cement legitimacy and power, instead became a stage for retribution. In the shadows of the crowd, the message was clear. In organized crime, exposure is fatal. Joseph Colombo was born June 16, 1923, in Brooklyn, New York. His father had been involved in bootlegging during Prohibition. Prison followed. The lesson was clear early. Crime brought profit, but also exposure. Colombo learned something different from that outcome. Avoid attention, survive in silence. He grew up in Red Hook and later Bensonhurst, neighborhoods where loyalty was enforced socially before it was enforced violently. Italian identity was tight. Community was protection. Silence was instinct. Colombo absorbed these lessons deeply. Unlike flamboyant gangsters of the era, Colombo was restrained, soft-spoken, measured. He preferred conversation to confrontation. Yet restraint should not be mistaken for weakness. By the late 1940s, he aligned with the Profaci crime family, under boss Joseph Profaci. The family valued strict hierarchy, with tribute payments flowing upward from soldiers to capos to the boss. Colombo thrived within these boundaries. He was disciplined, loyal, and predictable, a model soldier. Marriage strengthened his position. His wife, Rosalie, came from a connected family. Bloodlines mattered. Alliances mattered more. During the early 1960s, internal rebellion erupted. Crazy Joe Gallo and his faction challenged Profaci over money and authority. Colombo did not take sides publicly. He survived by remaining useful and quiet. Neutrality became his shield. After Profaci's death and the brief leadership of Joseph Magliocco, the family was unstable. The commission needed calm. They needed someone controllable, someone presentable. Colombo fit that profile. He became boss in 1963, not the most feared, but the safest choice. Power changed his perspective. Safety evolved into ego. Colombo, who had spent decades understanding invisibility, now saw himself as capable of redefining the family's public image. That belief, ambition paired with visibility, would prove dangerous. Colombo's rise illustrates a core mafia principle. Survival depends on discretion. Visibility invites correction. Loyalty is maintained not through charm, but through adherence to unspoken rules. Even as he commanded respect privately, Colombo's understanding of the shadows would soon be tested against the glaring light of public attention. By 1963, the Profaci family was fractured. The Gallo faction, led by Crazy Joe Gallo, openly rebelled over tribute payments and perceived favoritism. Brooklyn streets were tense. Soldiers watched each other carefully. Violence lingered in the alleys, behind closed doors, in whispered threats. Colombo's rise was strategic rather than violent. The commission, seeking stability, approved him as a compromise boss. He was disciplined, loyal, and predictable. The family needed a leader who could enforce order without triggering further chaos. Colombo fit perfectly. He moved quietly, calculating each decision. Meetings were conducted in private. Orders were memorized, not written. Soldiers knew loyalty was expected. Rewards were sparse. Punishments were certain. Colombo understood balance, assert authority while minimizing unnecessary risk. Yet the Gallo faction's lingering resentment required a different approach. Colombo recognized that public perception could reinforce his position. In 1970, he founded the Italian-American Civil Rights League, a public organization defending Italian-American communities from perceived FBI harassment. At first, it seemed innocuous: parades, press conferences, appeals to politicians. But the underlying motive was clear: power projection. Colombo presented himself as protector, leader, and figurehead of respect and fear. The League grew quickly. Italian Americans across New York rallied. Politicians courted him. Newspapers covered speeches. Television cameras documented parades. Colombo now existed in two worlds: the secretive hierarchy of La Cosa Nostra and the glaring public spotlight of political activism. This duality created tension. Inside the family, some questioned his judgment. Public exposure violated Mafia rules. Silence is power. Visibility invited scrutiny, and scrutiny threatened operations. Allies became uneasy. Yet Colombo pressed forward. Membership in the League swelled. Parades stretched for blocks. Police and FBI began paying closer attention. Each public appearance risked revealing names, alliances, or strategies. Colombo believed visibility could coexist with power. He was confident, even ambitious, seeing himself as a leader capable of modernizing the family's image while maintaining control over its clandestine operations. But the commission and other bosses saw a problem. Colombo had broken the unspoken code. His ambition, once private, had become a liability. Visibility had painted a target on his back. In organized crime, exposure is often corrected swiftly. Colombo's rise, public and ambitious, had set the stage for an inevitable confrontation. By 1971, Joseph Colombo had become a public figure in a way no other mafia boss had before. The Italian-American Civil Rights League parades were no longer simple community gatherings, they were political statements. Colombo openly criticized the FBI, claiming harassment and bias against Italian Americans. He gave interviews to newspapers, appeared on television, and addressed tens of thousands in rallies. What Colombo considered protection, the Mafia viewed as a liability. Inside the commission, whispers grew. Other bosses questioned his judgment. A boss must remain invisible. Power thrives in shadows. Public speeches break that rule. Exposure invites scrutiny. Exposure invites danger. The media painted him as a folk hero. Politicians shook his hand. Crowds cheered. The public saw a defender of rights. The Mafia saw recklessness. The Gallo faction, still embittered from previous conflicts, monitored him closely. Colombo had survived internal wars by staying quiet. Now he was bold, public, visible. They saw vulnerability, a rare opportunity to enforce discipline. Federal surveillance intensified. Wiretaps and undercover agents monitored the League alongside family operations. Evidence of Colombo's dual life accumulated. His public persona blurred with criminal activity. The psychological tension was tangible. Colombo had to maintain authority over soldiers conducting illicit acts while appearing legitimate to crowds cheering his political activism. Each word, each gesture could reveal too much.
Internal doubts surfaced. Allies questioned orders in private. Some began feeding information to rivals. The message from the commission was clear: visibility threatens control. Colombo failed to see that the spotlight itself was a provocation. By stepping into public view, he challenged not only law enforcement, but the internal code of the Mafia. In the weeks leading up to June 28, 1971, tension simmered. Every parade, every press conference, every televised interview became a countdown. The internal and external pressures converged. The turning point was not a single shot, not a single betrayal. It was the collision of ambition with ancient rules. Colombo's miscalculation was clear. Public ego invites correction. The stage was set. The audience was large. The consequences were inevitable.
By mid-1971, Joseph Colombo's visibility had reached a national stage. His speeches against the FBI and leadership of the Italian-American Civil Rights League drew the attention of politicians, journalists, and federal agencies alike. Senators requested briefings. Mayors invited him to City Hall. Television networks filmed his rallies. The Italian-American community saw him as a defender. The Mafia saw him as exposed. The FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover, had long monitored organized crime. Colombo's public profile complicated operations. Wiretaps captured league meetings alongside family business discussions. He was no longer operating purely in shadows. Each public appearance risked exposing structure, names, and alliances. Inside the commission, concern escalated. A public boss is a dangerous boss. Exposure threatened La Cosa Nostra nationwide. Other families feared Colombo's activism might provoke federal crackdowns or indictments. The message was clear: the Mafia tolerates private power, not public ego. Politicians, unaware of Colombo's criminal background, treated him as legitimate. Fundraisers, interviews, and media coverage amplified his influence. He lobbied against alleged FBI harassment, citing wiretaps and surveillance. Publicly, he seemed untouchable. Privately, he was increasingly isolated within the Mafia hierarchy. Psychological tension mounted. Colombo had to command soldiers conducting illicit operations in secret while performing publicly for large crowds. Every rally risked an unguarded word, a recognition that could unravel years of hidden authority. Internal whispers turned to planning. Rival bosses and factions debated intervention. The Gallo crew, still embittered, saw Colombo's exposure as a vulnerability. The Italian-American Civil Rights League, intended as protection, had become a liability. By June 1971, law enforcement scrutiny, political attention, and internal Mafia unease converged. The political stage was set. The drama would not end in speeches or debates. Ambition and public visibility had created a dangerous misalignment with the Mafia's code. Colombo's mistake was not crime, it was exposure. His visibility had painted a target. In the underworld, this is often corrected swiftly, decisively, and permanently. By the spring of 1971, Joseph Colombo's position within the Mafia had become increasingly precarious. His public persona, the national figurehead of Italian-American rights, alienated allies. Soldiers and capos who had once obeyed orders without question now whispered in private. Loyalty, the currency of organized crime, had begun to fracture. Colombo's visibility challenged the hierarchy, and the commission demanded obedience above all else. Rival factions saw opportunity. The Gallo crew, still bitter from the 1960s internal wars, monitored Colombo's rallies with suspicion. Public exposure made him vulnerable. Vulnerability in the Mafia is often met with betrayal. Even Colombo's closest bodyguards and confidants were caught between personal loyalty and organizational pressure. Orders from the commission were implicit. Discipline demanded correction. Silence was expected. Yet Colombo continued to hold press conferences, parade through Manhattan streets, and openly challenge authorities. Each act widened the gap between him and the network of power that had once shielded him. Within the commission, debate was heated. Some bosses feared a public assassination might provoke federal investigations. Others insisted it was necessary to enforce the code. The message had to be unmistakable. No boss, even one in good standing, could flout secrecy. Colombo's political ambitions and public bravado left him isolated. Allies who had once supported him privately now hesitated to act on his behalf. The Italian-American Civil Rights League, intended as a shield, offered no real protection. Its members were unaware of the underlying criminal dynamics and could provide no defense. Psychological tension mounted. Colombo noticed subtle changes, delayed reports from trusted soldiers, unexplained absences, whispered warnings in back rooms. The men he had counted on for support were now uncertain, fearful of reprisal from peers and the commission. Every decision, every public appearance carried risk. Every handshake and smile was shadowed by doubt. Betrayal was no longer a distant threat, it was imminent. The stage was set, loyalty fractured, visibility exposed him. In organized crime, the combination of isolation and perceived weakness is often the prelude to execution.
June 28, 1971, Columbus Circle, Manhattan. Thousands had gathered, flags waved, cameras clicked. Joseph Colombo stepped onto the podium to address the crowd. His bodyguards flanked him, alert but stretched thin in the open plaza. From the crowd, a young man in a white jacket emerged, calm, deliberate. His hand gripped a pistol. Seconds stretched like hours. The first shot rang out. Colombo staggered. The second hit him squarely. Chaos erupted. Screams pierced the air. People scattered in all directions. Police sirens tore through the streets. The gunman, Jerome Johnson, was immediately neutralized by Colombo's bodyguards. No interrogation, no questions, only silence. In that instant, the Mafia's code had been both violated and enforced. Public exposure had invited violence. The message was instantaneous. No boss, regardless of public justification, could openly flaunt the sacred rules of secrecy. Colombo survived, but was paralyzed, his physical authority gone, political influence fragile. Within hours, the family hierarchy shifted quietly, ruthlessly. Control moved to acting capos and loyalists. Decisions delayed during his rise were now executed with precision. The assassination attempt sent ripples beyond New York. Rival families watched. Soldiers understood. Ambition visible to the world could be fatal. Visibility is betrayal. The Mafia ensured lessons were learned immediately, without the public witnessing the inner consequences beyond what they had already seen. Colombo's rally, meant to assert legitimacy, had become a stage for correction. The commission's authority was reinforced through action, not debate. The principle was clear. Ego exposed in daylight is a liability punishable by swift enforcement. Even in survival, Colombo's career was finished. Power had moved elsewhere. His legacy, public yet crippled, would serve as a warning for years to come. After the shooting, Joseph Colombo's life became a shadow of its former self. Paralyzed from the neck down, he could no longer lead. Authority within the family shifted immediately. Acting capos and loyalists ensured operations continued without interruption. The commission quietly reasserted control, demonstrating that even a sitting boss could be neutralized without public chaos. The Italian-American Civil Rights League lost its leader, but not its message. Politicians and community supporters continued to cite Colombo's activism, largely unaware of the criminal context. Public perception and private reality diverged sharply. Rival factions recalibrated. The Gallo crew, already embittered, saw Colombo's incapacitation as confirmation that ambition without discretion invites disaster.
Internal discipline had been restored quietly, unmistakably. Law enforcement increased surveillance. The FBI and local authorities monitored family movements more closely. Colombo's public missteps had inadvertently strengthened the case for scrutiny and future prosecutions. Months later, Colombo died quietly in 1978, still paralyzed, still under shadow. The Mafia's rule of silence remained intact. The message endured. Visibility is vulnerability. Power in the underworld survives in secrecy, not spectacle. History remembers him publicly as a figure of Italian-American advocacy. Within La Cosa Nostra, he is remembered as a cautionary tale, a boss undone not by law, but by the very code he challenged. Columbus Circle, 1971. The scene returns in memory. Flags waving, cameras flashing, a man struck down not just by bullets, but by his own visibility. Joseph Colombo's story illustrates a fundamental truth of organized crime. Power thrives in shadows. Public exposure is betrayal. Ego invites correction. Discipline is silent, swift, and absolute. Loyalty, once fractured, cannot be restored. The line between ambition and recklessness is measured not by courage, but by discretion. The Mafia survives law enforcement, political pressure, and media scrutiny, but it cannot survive its own members' disregard for secrecy. Colombo sought legitimacy, a voice, a public presence. The world applauded. The underworld corrected. History, like the silent streets of Manhattan that afternoon, whispers its lesson. Control is maintained not through recognition, but through restraint, discretion, and invisible authority. For those who forget, the shadow always waits. The code endures. The files remain.